Welcome back everyone, Energy Fabricator here. Today I'll be doing a service and some repairs on my Fisher Paykel clothes dryer. I'll also be going through some other common repairs that may need to be done, so stick around and hopefully by the end of this video you'll know exactly what you need to do to keep your clothes dryer in good working order. Now before we get to work, I'll just give you a bit of a history on the dryer itself. It's about 13 years old. I took it apart about 4 years ago and I replaced the felt pads on the drum, and I also replaced the motor start capacitor and a small diode on the circuit board, which was actually pretty uncommon to have to do, but I've done that and it's been working well ever since. And just recently it started making some metal on metal noises and there was a lot of screeching going on, so I decided to take it apart and repair it again. And I thought I'd take this opportunity to give it a full service. I've stripped it right down. If you want to have a look at the photos of the disassembly, they're on my Google Plus page. There's a lot of other stuff there on the Google Plus page. I've started to use that a lot now, and there's a lot of content there, I guess, that is not on YouTube. Check that out. Now, one common fault with dryers is you might go to turn it on one day and it just does not spin around for whatever reason. Now, the most common cause for that problem is the motor start capacitor, which is this little white can here. And this one's just bolted straight onto this motor mounting bracket here. And it's rated to 7 microfarads, plus or minus 5%. So the way to test that is to connect your multimeter, capable of measuring capacitance of course, to the 2 terminals on the capacitor. And if we set that multimeter to read capacitance, remembering this is rated to 7 microfarads at plus or minus 5%, that should give us a minimum of 6.65 microfarads. Now we're reading 6.32 instead of 6.65, so it's a bit below the spec, but this has had some pretty heavy use, so I'm still happy with that. We've got a few years left on that capacitor, so it's easy enough to replace, so I'll call that capacitor okay. We'll just move on and do no work on that. But if you were to replace it, all you have to do is unscrew it or unclip it from wherever it's mounted to inside your dryer and remove the 2 terminals just by pulling them off, usually, because they'll have these spade terminals on there, and put your new capacitor on, as long as it's rated to the same or higher voltage, and it's rated to the same capacitance as your existing capacitor, and just plug the terminals straight back on and job's done. Simple as that. Now, another common problem with dryers is that you might come across a bit of a burning or a smoky smell coming out of it when it's in operation. The main causes of that could either be the belt being really worn, or more than likely there's a large bit of dust that's stuck on the actual heating element, which is located behind the main drum. Now, this is a piece of dust that I'm putting in there now that's come out of the motor, but generally it's all going to be very compressed and come in little chunks, and it's just going to collect in certain spots there. And then as the heating element heats up, it heats up the dust that's stuck behind it or next to it, and the dust actually gets scorched, and that's what that smell is that's coming out. Or in the worst case scenario, the whole thing could catch on fire, and yeah, then you've got some problems. So the best thing to do again is a bit of preventative maintenance. Get in there with some compressed air. If you don't have that, just use a little brush like this and just literally brush it all away, everywhere, all around the element, the main disc as well, and then get in there with a damp rag and wipe the whole thing down. Make sure there's no dust in there at all, and you're as good as gold, ready to go. Another common issue that you might come across is that your felt strip might get worn out and need replacing. So to access that, you'll need to remove the main drum, and then you'll need to probably remove some sort of retaining ring which is adjacent to the main door at the front of the unit. So from the inside there'll be some screws which I've actually already removed for the sake of this video. On the outer edge here there's a black felt pad or felt strip. I actually replaced this about 4 years ago when I replaced the motor start capacitor, and I've cleaned up most of it and it seems to be in pretty good condition still, so we're going to leave that as is. But I've left a bit unclean just so that you can see what it's going to look like if you don't maintain it and keep it nice and tidy. Now here's a close-up of the black felt strip that the drum runs on. It's the main bearing surface for the drum on this end. So I've gone over it with a vacuum cleaner, and then I've gone over it again with this little lint removal tool. Just literally scraped off all that lint. I found that this tool works a bit better than just using a brush because it doesn't disturb the felt too much. But as you can see over here, this is a small section that I haven't cleaned off. It does tend to build up quite a bit, so you've got to stay on top of that, make sure it stays clean, and that way you'll have a nice smooth surface for the drum to roll on. If you have a look at the actual ring, which is the outer bearing surface for the drum, you can see these little pads here. They're a hard sort of plastic, almost sort of feel like Teflon. There's 6 of these all around the inside of that ring. These tend to accumulate hard little bits of dust, I guess you could call it. So it's a good idea to scrape all of that residue off, run over it with a bit of a damp rag, and get that looking new again. That's pretty much all you need to do to this end of the drum, because these surfaces, this surface here and the black felt strip, is what actually contacts the drum. If you maintain those, then you should get good service life on that end of your drum. Now we've already gone over the motor start capacitor as a possible cause for the drum not rotating. The other possible cause for that problem would be a damaged or broken belt. So the only way to check for a damaged belt is to actually take it off. If it's broken, of course, you'll know that by just looking at it. But a damaged belt could be as little as a crack on the actual belt itself. Now I inspected this belt, and as you can see, it's broken. So on the inside there, obviously the belted section at the top here is still good, but if we turn it over, and you can only see this by taking it off the actual drum itself, you can see that it's broken all the way through. So what I've gone and done is to purchase a brand new belt. So we'll be installing a new belt on this unit. Now if you're in a situation where your dryer is working fine, except there's a loud screeching noise coming from the unit as the drum rotates, the most likely cause of that is going to be a drum bearing. In this case, the drum bearing was totally destroyed. I've got the housing here, one of the end caps is missing, the other end cap's here, it's all whacked out of shape. All the spaces and the retaining ring for the bearing here is all in pieces. That's how I found it. And the only thing intact was the actual bolt, so it was all starting to spin on the bolt there, and there's a bit of wear on the surface, but it hasn't gone through the bolt in any way, so we're talking maybe 50, 100 micron I could feel there with my nail. So that was the main reason we had to take this unit apart, and that was the fault. The bearing had to absolutely shit itself. So I went and purchased a drum bearing kit. So that's got the bearings and the spacers. This one here is actually slightly more tricky to install than most units. Generally, I mean, there's a lot of types of drum bearings. Some of them have a little cup and a ball situation, and that sits in the bearing and it just literally drops into place. Some of them have a little shaft with a rounded edge, and you put some sort of sleeve on there with some lubricant, and that sleeve sits in the bearing. So as I said, there's a lot of different types, but this one's, I guess, one of the more trickier ones with more parts involved, but I will be showing you how to install that as well, and that should fix the problem for this dryer. Now this should cover the Fisher and Paykel style drum bearing kits. If you've got another kit, generally they're going to be pretty simple to remove and replace. It's generally a 5 or 10 minute job to actually replace the parts for a drum bearing. Now if the work that you're doing involves removing the drum for whatever reason, you're not too far away from getting to the motor, so it's always a good idea to remove the motor and inspect it. Now the main thing I'm looking for here is bearings, making sure it's running freely, and the other thing is more of a preventative maintenance idea, but just check inside there and check on the rotor, because the rotor will usually have fins for the airflow, and I get in there with a little pair of clamps here and just remove any dust, any large pieces of dust that have accumulated on there. They'll all be compressed in there nice and tightly. That'll help the airflow through the motor. It'll also help your bearings and increase the life of your motor in general. Now just to give you an idea, this is I've actually cleaned this up already, and I blew it out with compressed air just to remove any loose bits of dust throughout the motor. There was a fair bit of stuff that flew out of there, so that's all nice and clean now. But just to give you an idea of how much stuff will come out of that motor, all of this stuff here was all caked in around the rotor. And that's not including all the stuff that actually flew out when I blew it with compressed air. Now the last thing I want to cover in this video is the pulley wheels. Now some of these dryers will only have one wheel, some will have two. In this case I've inspected the inside surface here where the belt runs on the pulley, and also the edge where the bearing meets the shaft there, just to make sure that there's no substances caked onto that, or big accumulation of dust there. So I've just gone in with a little brush, a little paint brush, and cleaned that surface all the way around on both sides. And once I'd done that, I went over it with a damp rag and just wiped the inside surface and the outer edges. And unfortunately, even though I've returned from the shop with my spare parts, I've just found a hairline crack where the plastic of the pulley meets the metal. So it looks like I'm going to need to go back again and spend a few more dollars and get a replacement pulley wheel. So there's another hour out of my day. I'll go and do that and get that part now, and we'll replace that part as well as the belt, as well as the drum bearing kit, and hopefully that will bring it back up to spec, and we should get a few more years out of it. Now there are a couple of other things that you may need to look at in regards to dryers, but what we've covered so far should get you out of 90-95% of the sort of problems that you'd encounter. The other sorts of things that you might want to start looking at are things like the temperature sensors here, which are attached to the heating element. We've got one on that side, we've got another one here on this side, and we've also got your switch here on top of the door, which is mounted in there, and if that's not working, obviously the dryer's not going to turn on, because it's not going to sense that the door's closed. We've also got another sensor over here. So there are a few little things that you may also want to check if the unit's not turning on at all for some reason, and it's not caused by one of the topics that we've already covered. But apart from that, that's pretty much all you need to know. Never really hear much about the electronics in the front panel getting damaged in any way, but having said that, I'll just show you a quick repair that I had to do last time when I took it apart. You can see on the top circuit board there that there's a little diode, and all around it it's all scorched on the circuit board. Now that was there last time when I took it apart, so I actually had to, well, I didn't have to, but I took the opportunity to replace that diode with a diode rated to a higher voltage, and it seems to be working fine. It doesn't look like that scorch mark has gotten any worse, so I think it fixed that problem as well. But apart from that, I mean, there's not much more to these things.